Welcome back to another Star Mini Gaming video. This video is beating Vince to the punch, and I mean that jokingly. I always enjoy his topics of the week, and so I thought I'd like to do my own. And so this is it. It's in relation to what Vince posted last week. Last week he said, "Why Warhammer YouTube? Like, why do we do it?" And tips for people who are interested in it. And this week I wanted to tie into that and say, why Warhammer when there's so many other options out there, and not just why we enjoy it, but also I guess like what is appealing to us, and in the same way might appeal to somebody else. So I'm hoping that this kind of follows along the same lines. If there are any responses, they'll be posted in the links below. But I'll go ahead and get started with why Warhammer for myself. I'm huge into narrative, and I love fantasy. That's really how it ultimately, I guess, kind of begins for me. I've been a Lord of the Rings fan for a long time. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I've enjoyed the movies. I enjoyed the books long before the movies came out. I enjoy the tabletop game. Like, I enjoy. Honestly, my favorite time period has always been more of the classic to medieval eras. Um, in terms of history, I've enjoyed that kind of fantasy esque story. I've always just found that the most compelling and interesting setting for anything to be in. Um, that's probably why I've enjoyed things like Star Wars so much, is because although Star Wars is set in a science fiction kind of futuristic setting, it still very much has that medieval feel to it, that fantasy feel to it. And so that's what really drew me to Warhammer, is that medieval fantasy was the first thing. And I've played 40k for a while, but I've really come to enjoy Age of Sigmar more. Not just for the gameplay. I do enjoy the game a little bit more. I do feel it's a little bit more free and open than 40k, but I guess the biggest thing for me in terms of the draw of it over 40k and others is, especially when compared to 40k, Age of Sigmar has the full spectrum represented in terms of like races and armies. And by that I simply mean like good and evil. Like in 40k, you don't have a good. Everyone is just varying degrees of evil. And while I enjoy having that in a good story or in a game, having only that for myself does get kind of boring, because I pick a faction not just based upon like who I like the look of and who I like to play. I mean, I've started really building my death army more on those aspects. It's who I like them aesthetically, at least some of their stuff, and I don't think there's any army in Warhammer that I like all of their stuff aesthetically, but I like a lot of their stuff aesthetically, and I like the way they play. It's something interesting. It's something different from what I'm used to, and so I decided to delve into them. But from a narrative perspective, like, while they're sometimes interesting and while they can have compelling characters within them. Really, the only reason I even consider them is Vlad within the end times. He's not a perfect character by any means. He's not like a good person, but he does have his moment of redemption, and he in the end times he has a choice to make, whether he goes for for himself for selfish reasons, or does he side with chaos, or does he fight what is ultimately a losing battle that is the most honorable one, and he chooses that one. And those are the characters that I've always found most compelling. But I do like to have a spectrum, and in 40k you don't have that. Everyone's just varying degrees of evil. But within Age of Sigmar, from a narrative perspective, I've really come to like the Stormcast, even though initially I wasn't against, I didn't hate their aesthetic, but I was kind of neutral on it at best. And I've really come to like them because they are that true good, and even perhaps further on the spectrum than them towards that true good end is the Seraphon. Like, their only purpose is to establish order and to destroy chaos. Like, their only reason for existence is to destroy evil. And so they were the first ones that really caught my attention, because while I don't want that to be the only thing in a narrative, I do like that is in there, because it's something that we don't see as often anymore. Um, in Lord of the Rings, I do feel like we do see that, especially in the books. And I know some people like rant about that and say that's childish or whatever, that those kinds of characters exist, but I think that that's part of what makes a story interesting, is having the full range, not just one or the other, right? And so that's really drawn me into where fantasy has gone now in the Age of Sigmar. Um, and then the aesthetics of the game, I do really like some of the models. I like the Terrorgeist. I've come to like the Mortis engine. It took me a little bit. I like the Hex Wraiths that I've been assembling, because honestly they look like they're crazy. They are the crazy dead, and that's kind of interesting. I like the Seraphon because of the dinosaurs. Like, honestly, who growing up, especially around my time of being a child, like, doesn't love the dinosaurs? I mean, that's whenever Jurassic Park came out, right? And so there's things that are a little bit different, and I've always enjoyed that kind of medieval time period, the classic era, that kind of stuff. I always found that the most compelling and interesting stories coming from things that are either from that or modeled around that. And so Warhammer falls into that for myself. And then the game itself is really fun. You have big monsters and stuff that you can smash your enemies with, and they do what big monsters should do. The game is pretty free-flowing. It's not a perfect game. I'm not trying to say that. I'm not saying it's without flaws. It clearly, no game is. But it's an enjoyable game. It's fun. It's quick to learn, but there's a lot to truly master. I like that. I like those kind of deeper levels within a game. After playing tabletop games for about 15 years, and easier to pick up a rule set is a pleasant change. Um, I play 40k, and I of course don't get every rule right in any of the games I play, but I know 40k and Lord of the Rings and these other games well enough that I can play them without consistently having to look back at the manuals. Maybe once or twice in a game we have to check something that doesn't come up very regularly, but it's nice that I don't basically have to be a dictionary every time I play a game, like a full encyclopedia set in my brain just to play a game. That's a refreshing change. But for myself, it's definitely the narrative that has drawn me in more than anything else. The game is a lot of fun, but the narrative is what's really pulled me into Warhammer, into the Age of Sigmar. So why for you? If you don't want to make a video about it, or you're not a YouTube content producer and you have no aspirations of it, then please feel free to comment below. I'd love to see why you've picked Warhammer when there's, of course, other alternatives available. What is it that is the particular draw for you that may not necessarily be unique solely to Warhammer, but maybe it's the combination of things that makes Warhammer really stand out to you. So please comment below. And until next time, this is James, and happy gaming.